like a man who, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he was taking a stroll with his wife. Something happened, somebody attacked him, knocked out all his teeth.
It's
He's
not
laughing.
funny.
It's not funny. It's horrible.
We live in the year 2016, and you still have.
It was a park, and at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he was taking a stroll with his wife.
I'm laughing because we think the world has come so far, and we're stuck in this.
You know what? It's a very scary world, and I apologized to my daughter-in-law the other day for leaving, for our generation, leaving their generation in such poor shape.
I don't think it's your fault. Who said their generation didn't make a problem from their own?
Yeah,
But
it's not your fault, but
I know it's not my fault,
we-
but I feel bad because we are
Right.
leaving them in a terrible state.
Yeah.
And I'm apologizing to you too, Rabbi
Oh,
Yonatan.
apology not accepted. I believe we're responsible for the problems in our own world, and we could fix them too. If they're around, we're perpetuating
We
it.
have no control over making laws and
Waging wars which probably
with-
shouldn't have
with
been
people
waged
like
and
ISIS
stuff.
and
Right.
criminals, and it's a very scary world right now. And
Yes.
I don't believe the world doesn't believe in war. So, because the world, and that means us, if not us, then our friends or our classmates still believe in war. That's why there are wars in the world.
You wonder why. Why do people want to kill each other?
that's a good question.
It's like, in class, you tell the kids, don't fight with each other. You can both keep the blocks, or just give up your toys. And on a world level, we're still fighting over the blocks and killing people for it. When you go to war and you kill somebody, sometimes you have no choice. You're defending yourself. But this concept of you killed another soul, that means that was someone's kid, that was someone's brother, that was
Right.
that is a damage that can never ever be repaired in the whole world.
That's exactly.
Do you want to try to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? You're dealing with a situation where it's not a government war anymore, it's a personal war. We lost brothers, we lost sisters, we lost cousins. We're not going to give it up because we didn't give them up. And how are you going to make peace between people who killed each other's family? It's not the same thing as they put sanctions on each other or they outvoted each other in Congress. It's not Democrats and Republicans. This is war. Someone killed my brother. Someone killed my sister.
I know, but somebody who drives a truck through a crowd.
Going 50 miles an
No,
hour.
I'm not justifying them. I'm telling you the contrary.
No, Israel is maybe a different situation, and I think if the Palestinians wouldn't want Israel destroyed, Israel wouldn't fight a war, right?
You're right, but wanting Israel to be destroyed is a thing of the past. There's more to it than just wanting Israel to be destroyed. These are acts of violence and vengeance and revenge. People were repeating cycles of the whole world fighting each other and killing each other and hating each other, and it's a why we think this is the way to solve problems, I don't know.
It doesn't make sense to me.
No.
Of course it doesn't. Of course not. It doesn't make sense to anybody who thinks.
No, anybody who's rational doesn't.
But
make
there are
sense.
wars in the Tanakh.
But the prayer is Lo yisa goy goycha. We're praying for a day where we'll put down our swords already. Not because everyone will agree with each other. That's not what it says there. We'll put down our swords because that's not the way to solve conflict. It's not the way to kill someone
Do you
else's
think
child.
it'll ever come to be that there won't be a war?
Absolutely, I believe the world, and I don't know how. I don't know where you start, but we have already made it halfway there. The consciousness of not wanting to fight, not wanting to go to war. I'm not talking here pacifism. That's not what I'm talking about. Putting flowers and guns. I'm not dealing with this issue. You used to live in a society where everyone was a warrior. That was the greatest thing to be to go out and be a crusader, to be a Cossack, to be a who's like that. We don't want. You want your kids to go to the military? You want them to go not because you're not a patriot. I'd rather them be a doctor and save lives that way. I'd rather them be a lawyer, protect people in court. I don't want them to go to kill
We
people.
used to have the draft. And
But
it stopped in 1960, 68.
Something has changed in the consciousness of people that war is not so valiant and brave anymore.
No, it's not.
It's almost a necessary evil. And we, unfortunately, have made it light years ahead in a world that's free. But we're fighting now against a world that's still in the medieval times. They're still in the days of decapitating people and murdering. They are not in the same generation as we are. They don't live in the same world as we do. They're in a different reality.
How do we
And that's
get
what you're
to
saying,
How
unless-
do we get them to our reality?
It
That's
takes
the
time,
thing.
no?
I don't have an
You don't
answer. If I had an
have
answer, we would have
you
world peace,
You
right?
don't have an answer.
I don't know what to do.
You don't, no.
We've been fighting with these. See, the world is waking up to Arab violence today, in 2016.
I know, they were so naive.
They've been doing this for thousands of years already.
Yes,
My
it's
great grandparents were being killed by Muslims. Nothing new happened here.
Yeah, it's horrible though.
And you see, the Christians used to be the same way. We let the Christians off the hook too easily. The Christians used to massacre people in the streets too.
Yes, they did.
Something happened in Christianity. I don't know that I can put my finger on it, but it could be that the world just got a little more secular. That could be. That the Christians are no longer synonymous with auto da fes and inquisitions and murdering people and dungeons, and they used to be. That used to be Christianity.
That's right.
The Pope used to oversee the biggest genocide in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Today it's a whole different world.
That's right.
I hope that the same thing happens to them, but what can I do? We're busy, meanwhile, the Jews watching from the side of history, just hoping they don't kill us, and they are.
That's right.
The whole world has now joined the fate of the Jews, and that's the sad thing. You know, France will still say Israel is an occupying force, and will still say it because they don't see it
bad
in
for
that
France.
lens.
They've been really hit hard. Really hit hard. A few months ago, outside of Paris, in the nightclub. Now this. Police officers being shot and killed.
If you don't live in a world where life is valuable,
No, you're right.
Then
That's a good way of putting it.
if life doesn't have value, then what is life? I mean, we are so. I was just thinking about now. I helped. We're doing a shloshim now, a 30-day mourning period for somebody, and if you look in this week's parasha, just the fact that if you come in contact with a dead body, you cannot come into the temple. You cannot pray there. You have to wait 7 days of cleansing, of purity, of mikvahs, of ritual baths. The Torah doesn't let us value death. We just don't have a choice. Death is synonymous with impurity. It's synonymous with. We had great rabbis that refused to go to cemeteries
Really?
because Jews don't go to cemeteries.
But then a lot of people go and pray.
Now
at
today there's a whole that
graves.
people
Right.
go and pray at graves.
Right.
The Vilna Gaon never went to a
I
grave.
have a question.
The Rambam didn't believe in going to graves, and not,
I never go.
and not
I
because God
can't.
forbid
I
we
can't.
don't like the people who are buried there. To the contrary, there's a saying in Judaism: in their death they commanded us to live. We value life more than we value death. We value, instead of visiting someone's tomb, why don't we make sure that they didn't actually die? Why don't we let their legacy live on? Why don't we make sure that the next generation is not overcome with death and sadness and pain? And now, so we do. It's part of life. We miss people. We go pray by their graveside. We visit them. That's the comfort for us. Fine, but to turn death into this holiday of Halloween or the Day of the Dead in Mexico, for a Jewish mind, these things are unthinkable. It's unthinkable that something dead could have any value to it, any holiness, any spirituality to it.
Can I ask you why, when I was pregnant with my first son back in '69, my grandmother passed away, and I was not allowed to go to
The funeral.
the funeral. And I really, really was upset about that. My mother said, "You can't go. You're pregnant. You cannot walk on soil." Why? Or is that Bubba Mises
In Jerusalem, in Jerusalem, women don't go to the cemetery at all, ever. And in Jerusalem, the custom is the family is never by the funeral. The family escorts the body till the gates of the cemetery and then goes home.
Really?
And other people bury the body. Very strange customs that happen in Jerusalem, and we learn from those things. In the Jewish world, there is no rule about cemeteries and funerals, and suffice it to say that it's not a Baba Maisa. It's also not codified. It's not like you couldn't go to that funeral. The idea is that Judaism looks at a woman as the source of life.
Right.
And as a source of life, life shouldn't hang around where there's death. Especially a woman who's pregnant. And we always, in Jewish law, pregnant women are very sensitive. We don't want to ever put someone in a situation where, God forbid, that life that they're carrying could then turn into a death because of an experience that they're experiencing that is too stressful for them. And Judaism took, meaning the being pregnant and carrying a new life and giving it to the world outweighs being at a funeral and respecting the dead. Because your responsibility at this point in time is tasked with giving life, not with
that.
respecting the dead. It's not a law, meaning if you wanted to go and you pushed it, probably you could have, but it's been the feeling in the Jewish street. I used to have this question all the time. I go to Israel once a year, and I want to visit the cemetery to see my grandparents, pray by their graves, and my aunt always, you can't go on this day, you shouldn't go there, you can't go with your wife, don't take your kid. So when can I ever go? And are those things Baba Mises? I don't know if they're Baba Mises, but they're meant to show you that the value is the stress on life.
And not
Which is why we we always put up memorial plaques in a synagogue. We always dedicate things that people use in living. Every siddur, every book has a plaque in honor of, in memory of. And that understanding is that it's, when you go put flowers on a grave, what is it, aside from my personal comfort, what did it accomplish for the world?
Nothing. But your personal comfort means a lot.
Sure, which is why for me it's a valuable thing.
That's right.
But we always felt that what if I donate a Torah scroll, which will be used every week, then that person is still living through an object that's being used
but it doesn't
in
take
this
the
world.
place of actually going to the cemetery.
And absolutely not. And that's why we
You
do
do
both.
both, right.
We always go to the yard to the grave,
Right.
and we say Kaddish. But at the end of the day, we always try to push life into the picture.
Thank you for answering that.
Of course, well, it's a
For
great
years,
question.
that's been weighing on my
It
mind.
was actually, when my father died, my mother wasn't allowed to go. And
Why was she?
no, she
Oh,
was
no?
not pregnant.
Okay.
And her friend
Was it
said,
the custom in the family, or was that
No, we weren't Orthodox at all.
So what was
But
the?
he had become, my father had become Orthodox. Okay, so he was buried in an Orthodox place where actually there was a cemetery just for men and the cemetery just for women, and she wasn't allowed to go, but she went because a friend of hers, because she absolutely wanted to go, and a non-Jewish friend of hers. I mean, she wouldn't have gone because she didn't have the strength to kind of fight, the rabbi or the system or whatever. She was anyway angry at the rabbi. So said, we're going to go. And they went.
Okay. What was
but-
their reasoning of not?
But you know something? The fact, I mean, this wasn't the only thing. There was a whole series of things made her really upset with Frumkeit. So for her, it was really hard when I
Sure,
came.
I believe that.
Because she was just,
I believe
besides herself.
that. Unfortunately, we have a lot of superstitions surrounding death.
Mhm.
And because of that, we don't delve into this topic until it's too late. Meaning, even when we're in yeshiva, you study the laws of mourning, and they kind of try to do it fast because you don't want to dwell, people don't like to talk about it. But at the end of the day, it turns out that this is the subject in Judaism that is the least developed. And I don't mean it in a negative way, just how many people are really. They know all about weddings and about bar mitzvahs. And when it comes to death, it's a very gray, cloudy area. And there's a lot of things that we probably should be doing differently, or at least understanding more about, but we don't. I mean, now in Israel, there was a big story about. And again, I don't know why, because I'm also from that gray area, but the custom in the Jewish world is that if a baby dies within a certain amount of time to childbirth, that the baby is buried in a grave without a marker on it, and the parents are not at the funeral. Why is it that way? I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know
Because
why.
the baby isn't part of this world yet. It's
so
as if the baby hasn't really come.
but what
into
about the
this world.
parents who want to be at
Right.
that funeral?
No, I'm not.
I
I'm
mean,
not
there's
defending
no
it. I'm just
closure.
saying
If
that.
you don't go to the cemetery and
So this was a-
physically bury and take the
It's
shovel
no
and
clo-
the
right.
So
dirt,
this was a big fight now in
that
Israel.
to
Of,
me was no closure. And
Right?
then-
No, I understand.
we understand
but,
that's what Jews might have done, but this couple, so we don't connect with it. We want to be there, and it was a big discussion. So what happened? Do you let someone do something that goes against tradition or not? And I don't
especially
have
if
I
it's
don't have
not
any understanding.
codified, then in a way you can turn people, make them really bitter about Frumkeit.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I wanted to start today's class with something different.
Okay.
No, because it's about this. It's exactly about this. I don't know where to start. I want to start a new topic now for the next few weeks. That's
Okay.
my new plan. So it's a new discussion, new
I'm
learning.
not going to be here for 2 weeks.
So you'll miss out a little
I'll
bit,
miss
but
out,
you'll be okay.
I know I'll
Zlat
be
Hashem.
okay.
You'll
I'll miss
survive.
everybody, but
You'll
I'll be
survive.
okay.
Let's ask you a question. It sounds random, but it's not as random as it sounds. Should my wife call me Rabbi or just by my name?
Just by your name.
In public, she might want to call you rabbi.
And in private?
No. Private, you are.
It's up to you. How do you feel about it?
Hello.
Well, before I tell you how I feel, let me ask you, let's pretend we're being cold and objective.
Okay.
Does she not have an obligation to respect the Torah scholar? forgive the political incorrectness of this question. I'm asking for a reason. I can't go up to a rabbi and say, "Hey, Joe, how you doing?" That would be considered disrespectful. Kind of like if you're in the doctor's office. Though today, doctors don't carry the weight they used to carry. But it used to be a very important thing to call a doctor by the title doctor. So what should she call me?
I say by your name. You're married to the person, and you know, it's like, should I call my husband doctor in private? No. Look,
Well, why in public? What's the difference in public and private? Tell me.
people are around, and it's a certain.
I mean, you do have a role, and it's kind of
Don't worry about my ego, but that's not why I'm asking this question.
No, but you have a role. So it sets a tone, and it sets an example. You are called a rabbi, and if she calls you by your name, then it would be much easier for other people also just to call you Yoni, But in private, you're the love of her life. I mean, you're going to call. She has a different rabbi. If there is a halachic question, you go somewhere else, right?
So is that necessary to that's a good point, but is that what if I was her rabbi? Would she still call me rabbi?
Well, first of all, that wouldn't be a good idea.
No, what if though? I'm giving a what if scenario. I'm asking for a reason.
I think in public.
Then you would have to call her Rabbitson.
Well, fine, that could be true. Do I have to call her Rebbitzin?
Well, maybe in public you could call, and you do call her often Rabbitson, right?
So
No, I'm still sticking to my first answer that you are in love, you married each other for a reason, and by calling you rabbi in private, it's like, why do, I can't explain it.
Like, maybe she had not rabbi or not your first name, but by a pet name,
Yeah.
Sweetie or something.
okay. Well, let me ask you this question. Let's make the stakes higher. Give me a name of a great rabbi, alive or dead. You know,
Kanievsky.
Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. Okay. Should his wife call him Rabbi or Chaim?
Chaim. It's a loving, endearing term. It's respectful within.
The greatest rabbi in the Lithuanian world, in the whole globe.
It doesn't matter. He's still her husband. You go out in public, when you're out in public and there are a lot of people around, then it's rabbi.
Oh, so you agree with me?
Yes, absolutely. But in private, no. You could even call him Schmojo, whatever.
Snooky.
Well,
You know,
hopefully you
it's still your
respect
husband.
the
You married
person
him
no matter what the
before.
time.
I'm
became
just
this
jumping. I'm
famous
just
rabbi.
jumping in here since I just
Yeah.
jumped in. So I know that some of the families that we know, that you also know some of these families, the rabbis go by their Hebrew name for just about everybody, and then you get sometimes a check from them or something where you have this English name. Because in the English-speaking world, they have another name, and so some of their wives actually call them by that name.
Really?
Because that's how they knew them.
Because that's how
what-
they knew them.
Interesting.
And so at whatever point they decided to go completely with their Hebrew name for the outside, personally, some of them call them by the English
I
name.
didn't know that.
Let me tell you.
I would never look at you and call you by your name. It's always rabbi. Sorry.
Now, can I tell you that this is
Not me.
less of a.
Because I know him as Yo.
Imagine if this was.
I also, it's very
Imagine if this was
I
New
do
York.
both.
Imagine
I
this
do
was New
both.
York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In New York, you don't
Everybody's a
call
rabbi.
anybody by their first name, and even
Oh, because
meaning
they
my
don't.
son calls, or he will. When I was a child, I called my friends' parents by their name,
Mhm.
their first name.
Uh-huh.
That's how we were. And I think that's what Californians
That's
still
what
do,
we
if I'm
do.
not
That's
wrong.
exactly
Yeah,
right.
you
Yes.
call them by their
do.
first name.
And if they say Mrs. Bucky, I say, please call me.
Right.
It makes
right.
you feel old. It makes you feel like, when
Yeah,
people call me
I
Rabbi
love
Halevy,
her.
I'm like,
I
please
don't
don't call me.
wanna-
Please don't call me Rabbi Halevy, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the East Coast, though, calling someone by their first name is
that's
considered
awful.
very disrespectful.
Disrespectful.
Right.
Yeah,
Meaning, when
call
I
me-
introduce Elchanan to somebody in New York,
Say.
I have to say Mr. and Mrs.
Mrs.
Goldberg.
Mm-hmm.
Say hi to Mr. Goldberg. Why can't I just say hi, David? Why does it have to be
Right.
that way?
It's,
It's just that in that place in the world, that's a
that's
formality.
My
right.
daughter
that-
in
It's
law
cultural.
It's
That's
a culture.
cultural.
cannot find a way to talk to me because she was very much raised like this. She can't call me Mrs. Green because she's my daughter-in-law. She doesn't feel comfortable calling me mom because she was not raised that way. Adults or older people, she's also an adult. Now she has kids. She calls me Bobby because that's easy, right?
So my wife has the
that
same problem.
happens, yeah.
My wife refuses to call my parents by their first name because where she comes from, do not call people by their first name,
Right.
especially not parents. She also refuses to call them mom or dad or Abba Ima because she has a mother and father,
Right,
and,
exactly.
and in her family that's considered very disrespectful.
That's right.
Meaning you have one parent, don't give
That's
anybody
right.
else that name.
That's right.
And calling them Mr. and Mrs. Halevy is to my parents is very disrespectful, but that's what she would do in her family. And so now you're right, there's a Saba and Safta, grandma, grandpa, but these are real questions, and the reason we don't deal with them so often are because our world has lost a certain refinement. Perhaps, and I'll judge us favorably, perhaps we've become more real, more genuine, we dress the way we want, we talk a little bit more the way we want. But there was a certain finesse to the world that was before us where things carried weight, people had value. You expected a president to dress a certain way, you expected your doctor to speak with a certain language, you expected your teacher to hold a certain integrity. Today it's, sometimes you walk into a classroom, and I'm not talking about in a Jewish school, in a normal school, and you see the way teachers dress to school,
Horrible.
and it makes you wonder, are you educating my child or are you a model for some catalog somewhere?
Absolutely. My grandson had a teacher. I felt like breching every time I looked at her.
But is that maybe she's telling? Listen, I'm more real. Why do I have to put on some?
You have to look
so-
decent. You
She
have
says
to be a role
she
model.
thinks she looked
But
in the
you
world.
have to be a role model for children.
Do you
and to
know
look good.
that when
Also, they're not called teacher. They're just addressed by their name.
is that true today? I don't know.
Mrs. So-and-so.
Do
or
they call
Mr.
people by their first
so-and-so.
name in school?
No. Not
Well, it
where I
depends on
go.
what
Not
school.
my grandson.
Where I went to school was Mr. and Mrs. When I went to Baltimore, it was Sir and Ma'am. I didn't call anyone Sir my whole life, and I didn't call you Sir. And if I called someone Sir, it's because you don't know their name. Like, excuse me, Sir. That's what you say, right? But
Right.
never as a title of respect you call someone Sir. But in Baltimore, that's what was done. That's Maryland. That's the.
I take it back. My granddaughter, who's in fourth grade, she'll be going in fifth. It's Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so. Not the last name, but the first name.
Oh, so you should know.
Oh, right.
So
It's
do
always
that.
Miss or
I have a
Mr.
book here on the
Yeah.
shelf, the Pelioitz. Rabbi Eliezer Papo, a Sephardic rabbi from a few hundred years ago. And he writes in there that it's forbidden to call a rabbi by his last name. Rabbi Halevy is disrespectful. Halevy, that's not his name. Yoni.
So you're Rabbi Yonatan.
Rabbi Yoni. Meaning, not just a rabbi, it would be doctor, it would be Mr. and Mrs. It's considered so impersonal to call someone by their last name in the culture that he came from,
Wow.
that you do give them their title, but only their first name. Their last name is considered, when you don't like someone, say, oh, there's Mr. Goldberg here. But if you really respect that person as Mr., and you'll find that in the Sephardic world, we really do use that path. Whereas we call them Rabbi Kanievsky, Rabbi Schneerson, Rabbi Feinstein. In the Sephardic world, we call them Chacham Ovadia, not Chacham Yosef, his last name. We call him Chacham Mordechai Eliyahu. We call them Chacham Mordechai. And that's the way we refer to them. Kind of like in the old Ashkenazi world, they didn't call Rav Moshe Feinstein Rabbi Feinstein. They called him Reb Moshe. They called the Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Reb Yaakov. Those were the names because it was considered disrespectful to call someone Rabbi Feinstein. And it's perhaps an American influence that gave us this reverence for last names. But essentially, I'm not Halevy. I'm Yoni. That's who I am. That's me. Halevy is the family that I'm from. Why call me by my family? But I think these are cultural things. They change depending on the society that you're in, the place that you're in, and you have to know where you are when you speak to certain people. I always have to, when I get to East Coast mode, to just click in. A lot of people, you just call them Mr. and Mrs., Rabbi, Doctor, whatever the titles are, you use them. Okay, that's the way the world works. Back to the story of Rabbi Kanievsky. Does his wife have to call him Rabbi? I want to read to you something. Where did I get to the wrong page? I want to read you something from a rabbi called the Chazon Ish.
My new son-in-law made up a name. They made up names for us. Nicknames, sort of like that was accepted. So if it wasn't accepted, it would be.
Well, then you have a choice.
Right, and so it's okay. I just got a birthday card from him, so it said that.
Who are you?
I'm a mumsicle.
Mumsicle.
Because they call Tony Popsicle, because he goes by Pop to the grandchildren. So from my other daughter. So, and my first son-in-law calls me Judy. He does. I'm like his he's had other mothers-in-laws.
I wanted to read to you works from a rabbi called the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish was one of the greatest Ashkenazi rabbis who lived in the generation before us in Israel. He was European, went to
Who's
Bnei Brak.
Ashkenazi?
Of course, the Chazon Ish was Rabbi Avram Yishayahu Karelitz was his name. And in his writings on marriage and relationships between a husband and a wife, he writes something very interesting. Lefamim, sometimes. Haitiachasut bechavod v'cherdat derech eretz. When you treat someone with a little too much respect and too much etiquette and too properly, mareh chisaron kiruv. It shows a certain lacking of closeness. When you respect someone too much, it shows that you're afraid to be so close to them, or that you feel like they're unapproachable to you. V'tzarich yitaches yachas shel yoter kiruv. And a husband and a wife have to be closer to each other than professional acquaintances. And then he gives a few examples of what a person should do and how they should ask. He writes, you should know, the Chazon Ish was, if you would think about him, like
When
a really
did he live?
serious... He probably passed away in the 1950s. Rav Peretz used to pray in his minyan when he was younger, when he first came to Israel and went to yeshiva. I want to say he passed away in the 50s. That's maybe the 60s, but I don't think he made it that far.
And he lived in Israel? or-
And he lived in Bnei Brak. He was a rabbi in Europe, and then he was really the rabbi of Bnei Brak, even though he didn't hold an official position. But in the Lithuanian Torah world, you drop the Chazon Ish's name, it's like dropping the Baal Shem Tov's name in the Hasidic world. He's a very revered scholar in that community, and not one that you would think would write things like this. Very serious. You think of Chazon Ish serious, Lithuanian, a Litvak. This I can't explain to you other than that. He writes the following: Uvdichut v'kalut, and a little bit of lightness and playfulness is the word. Yoter ahuv, that makes someone more beloved. Mikoved rosh v'cherdat kavod, than being serious and respectful all the time. The husband and wife should be a little bit not so respectful to each other, more playful, more close. Light is the word he uses. This is how, in what kind of relationship? Uvichus yad yamin lesmol. Should be like a right hand and a left hand. That's how a husband and a wife should be to each other. And then he says, El nedaber b'lshon nochechut. You should never speak to your spouse in third person. Why would you speak to your spouse in third person? Anybody sit here speak a language aside from English?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
In that language, is there a way to speak respectfully to someone in third person? I might be using the phrase third person incorrectly, but I think I am.
More formal as opposed to familiar?
When you go to a rabbi in Israel, you would never say you to the rabbi. You would say atem, you in plural. Atem rotzim kos mayim. Do you, plural, want, plural, a cup of water? Let's think of that.
In Spanish there is usted.
Instead, yeah.
Instead. Okay, so
Yeah. And
imagine the
German
closest
there's-
I can get to this in English would be when I spoke to my rabbi. I still speak to my rabbis in yeshiva. I'll never say, Rabbi, do you want to come to my house? Would Rebbe like to come to my house?
Oh.
Can I get Rebbe a glass of water? Can I get Rebbe? You never speak to them as you. That used to be the way
No,
people
in-
spoke
in
to their
German you
parents
don't need
also.
that. You don't.
Really?
It's like usted. You say si.
Yeah.
And then see,
So
that's it.
says the Chazon Ish, even though this may be a respectful way for people to speak to each other, and it was almost done when you respected somebody, you spoke in this way. To say you is like what you say to the guy who's selling you watermelons in the street. It's not the same kind of respect. It says not to your spouse. So you can't speak this way to your spouse. It's because you must be closer to them than someone else who has to respect them. This is very interesting, and Rav Peretz is very strict about this. Like you all said, you might be a rabbi to the whole world, but to her, you're her husband, and she calls you by her first name, and you call her by her first name. Bottom line is, all the titles, all the positions, you must be closer than anybody else in the world. And part of that closeness is not playing this game of too much respect. Not too much respect in the opposite of that is disrespect.
Right.
Meaning formality versus real, natural, organic
Casual.
closeness.
A little bit more casual.
This is what is required from us. Why? So what? I mean, this should be obvious, no? I'll tell you, Rav Peretz does agree that in public, if somebody wants to say rabbi in public, It's not because she calls him rabbi, it's because that's what everyone else knows them as. That's perhaps the right way to teach other people, the way to speak to them. But nobody would think that when Rav Chaim Kanievsky's wife calls him Rabbi Kanievsky, she doesn't call him that in the kitchen when they're making dinner. That's what she calls him around everybody else because that's what's correct to do. Kind of like you might call your spouse dad or mom or Abba, Ima in front of the children. That way they speak to them respectfully. Though you should know how parents is very much against that. I know that's what's done. I know that's what the world does. I told you way back in the day when we started learning from our parents that truth is his biggest flag. Everything that's not truthful, even if it's what's normal. If someone says what time is and you say, oh, it's 11:15, but it's 11:16 now. How can you tell them it's 11:15? He'll never say that it's 11:15. It's 11:16. Before Shabbat, when he goes to synagogue, he will never tell his wife Shabbat Shalom. It's not Shabbat until I come home from synagogue. So he tells her Shalom, and when he comes home, he says Shabbat Shalom. So those of you who wish people Shabbat Shalom on Wednesday, they will never do such a thing. He'll never say, have a good night, if it's not dark outside yet.
Oh.
Just because you're leaving work at 5 doesn't mean it's nighttime yet.
But it's nighttime somewhere.
And I'll tell you what this does. Now, it might sound, when I first met my parents, it sounded a little bit rigid. But then you realize that when he tells you something, he really tells you the truth. He'll never say, oh, I was at this place, there were hundreds of people there. There were not hundreds of people there, there were dozens of people there. Be honest. When people know that you speak truthfully, they'll value your words much more.
So like when the Donald said there were thousands of Muslims there, maybe 2 of them were there.
So this is, I don't know politics, I'm not involved in politics. I just, I can tell you that when we speak truthfully, it's very important. So why did I tell you about speech?
About how you would address somebody, how she would
Oh,
address
that's to
somebody.
say dad if it's
Oh,
your
dad.
husband.
She said, it's your husband. Why
I
are
don't
you
do
calling
that
her
either,
dad?
yeah.
Oh,
So someone said, oh, we call her Ima, we call our wives Ima, so the kids know what to call her.
Right.
But I said, listen, I have X amount of kids, sis. And I called my wife for my whole life by her first name in front of the kids. And guess what? My kids grow up knowing who their mother was. Nothing happened to them, they didn't know. And oh, fine, if you want to call your spouse, husband, dad, I'm not getting involved. I'm just telling you that in this world, he considered even calling them mom or dad a sign of too much formality. A husband and a wife should be closer than
But
that.
when you talk to the kid, you can say,
Your
you know,
mother.
Your mother, yeah, that's a
Your
truthful
mother.
statement.
Yeah.
Mom
Mom says that.
Mom said she'll meet you, so yeah.
Right, yeah, of course. You wouldn't tell them,
that's okay.
As
Devorah
the-
said that you should go. That's also
Right.
disrespectful. Meaning,
Right.
and everything takes a certain common sense that people must have. And the problem is we live in a world where there's not enough common sense. And you could sit here. And unfortunately, this makes problems because you needed to. I don't have to spell out everything for you. You use your logic and figure things out. So why am I telling you about this? There was a lady in Israel. Not getting into politics. There was a lady in Israel last week, 2 weeks ago, who committed suicide. And it shook up the Israeli world, not because people don't commit suicide all the time, but because the story, and I don't know who's right in the story, I don't really care who's right in the story. She was a Hasidic woman, 7 children, and ended up divorcing her husband. She moved out of the religious community, she became secular. She took 1 daughter with her, and she, for all the years that she lived apart, did not see her 6 other children. They wouldn't talk to her, they wouldn't look at her, they wouldn't speak to her. She ended up writing a book about a fictitious figure like her, and all the suffering and torment she went through leaving the religious community. And they found her 3 days later dead in her car in a beach somewhere. And the world was shooken up because of some of the things she wrote, maybe in her late 30s, early
the daughter
40s.
that lived with her, how old was
The
she?
daughter that lived with her was in her 20s, and the court had to rule, are they going to do a religious funeral for her or a secular funeral for her? And the court ruled that the first daughter is going to do a first funeral that's secular, and after she leaves, the other 6 children can come and do a religious funeral, and that way they could fulfill both families' wishes. Now this shook up Israel for obvious reasons, to shake up anybody, this kind of story. But what happened and why she died and whose fault was it and why didn't she see her kids and religious politics are not part of my story today. There's a Hasidic group, only one. You cannot, no other Hasidim fall into this category, none. One Hasidic group who has on their flag made synonymous abstinence from sexuality equals holiness. And they, based on the advice of their Rebbe,
But they all have kids. What do you mean abstinent?
I'll explain. Their advice from we're all big kids here. This is a big person conversation. This is not for children. Whoever's watching on YouTube. Their Rebbe, who's still alive, continues his father's rules, which pretty much regulate any contact between a husband and a wife. I'm not talking here about people who are not married to each other. That's obvious that doesn't ever happen. And some of the now this is a group that you can choose to opt out of, but those who are part of it and choose to be part of it follow a very rigid set of rules, much of which was never known to the Orthodox community. This lady did the unspeakable, which is she wrote down the things that they do that they always kept secret, because part of this group's discussion is kept secret. Unless you're part of it, you don't know about it. Now, we as rabbis have known about some of these rules because of the problems they create, and the fact that many people from those groups end up in counseling or therapy or discuss from other rabbis out of this circle. So we do know some of the things, but I'll tell you a partial list. In the single ages, those genders are separated, but in this Chassidut, it's an extra level of separation. Single people don't go to weddings. They shouldn't know that people get married. You understand? They don't go to weddings.
They know that people get married.
Their
Whether they have the
classmate gets
wedding or
married,
not.
he only invites the other people in his class who are married. That his younger siblings don't go to the wedding. Now, their Hasidic group, a husband and a wife are allowed to be intimate with each other twice a month. And only when they're personal, they call them lieutenants or captains. There's the Rebbe, and the Rebbe has different people in every community, and every couple has to speak to that person in their community, and has to be approved the night before if they can be together. The husband and the wife never sleep in the same bed. Doesn't make a difference what time of month it is, doesn't make a difference when it is, they always sleep in separate beds. They do not walk in the streets together at all, ever. A husband and wife don't walk on the same side of the street. They do not eat together.
What's the rationale for this?
It's all to reach a high level of holiness, supposedly. Now, I obviously, you don't have to have my disclaimer, but I don't agree with any of this. I'm just sharing information here. Those things didn't break the camel's back in this girl's story. When she was asked what was the most painful experience that she had in that Hasidic group, her answer was the fact that in that group, husbands and wives never referred to each other by their first name. It is unthinkable to call your wife by her first name or your husband by his first name. It's always Mr. and Mrs. or husband and wife. But that closeness of first name, their Rebbe felt was too inappropriate. And she writes in her memoir that for 20 years that she was married, her only hope was to hear her husband say her name. And once, when she approached him on the topic and asked him, he ran out of the house, ran to his rabbi, came back to the house and said, either you give up this crusade, or I'm moving out of the house and sleeping in the synagogue. Now, why am I telling you this? The
Because
point
we're
of
talking
today,
about how to dress.
the point of today is not to make any religious community look bad. Sometimes people think that I like to put down everybody under the sun. That's not correct. When you see a problem, you have to address it. And if I cannot fix it for them, then at least for us, we should know there are certain things that are just not okay. Even if people who are supposed to be okay say that that's what they should do. Well, we're still adults. In that Hasidic group, a husband and a wife never hug or kiss each other. Never. Not even when they're together. These are things that their Rebbe decided are inappropriate, not necessary for a relationship. And yeah, they do have 13, 15, 16 kids, but it's only under very strict
Yeah, they meet
guidelines
twice a
and rules. Now you should know, this whole thing goes against every tenet of Jewish law that we have in our Shulchan Aruch. It goes against everything that we know to be true in Judaism.
There are fanatic groups in every place.
Now, this
right?
fanatic group, though, consists of hundreds of thousands of people.
And where are they
It's
primarily? Where do they
in
live?
New York and in Israel.
How old is this group?
300, maybe 200 years old. It's not a new age cult that opened up yesterday.
I've never heard of this.
how do they reconcile with what's in the Shulchan Aruch?
They do what all other Orthodox Jews do. We're always allowed to be stricter than what it says in the Code of Jewish Law, right? Those of us who have 2 sinks in our house, or will use 2 different, all of us, they took this to an extreme, and then the sexual department. Now, it's obvious that such things maybe were picked up from the Catholic Church, who taught that sexuality is evil, and all other such things, but in the Jewish religion, this is not a spiritual way to live your life. But it's what's taught. And I know I have married into a family that has such people in that family who are part of that religious group, and it's a problem. It's a real problem. And maybe for the Rebbe, that's what worked for him. Maybe him and his wife were at this place where their relationship was purely verbal and spiritual. Maybe. And I don't want to say that he... But what about for your Hasidim? Just because you lived a whole different life doesn't mean that your students all have to do the same thing. When did it hit me for the first time? When I got my first smicha, my first rabbinic relationship. I don't have an office anymore at Shul to point to, so. My first smicha was on doing marriages. Chuppah and kiddushin. It's my favorite part of being a rabbi. Marrying off young couples and even old couples, I don't mind, just marrying off people.
Although you've said so many times how problematic that is.
Absolutely.
Okay. But it's still your favorite part?
It's my favorite part of being a rabbi. It's to see a new life, to see something happen. 2 people who were strangers just not so long ago become best friends. It's a special thing. I never marry off a couple without learning with them first. I always study with the groom, my wife studies with the bride. We do a few classes together, the 4 of us. Always. I will not marry somebody who doesn't have time to learn with us. So even if I marry off a couple in Israel, we spend hours on Skype together beforehand, and always 1 class in person when I get there. So if I have to fly in 3 days before the wedding, and that's just what has to be done, that's what's going to be done. I will not just walk blindly into chuppah. This is not an honor, it's a responsibility. And part of being a rabbi is helping people figure out the beginning of life. And there are a lot of things that people need to know, and it's not all just law about family purity and those kind of things. It's just a lot of things that as a spiritual leader, you have to help people get in the right mindset to start off a marriage. When I learned from Harav Peretz, and you should know that most rabbis who do weddings didn't ever study to do weddings. Rabbis who officiate at wedding ceremonies do it just because they're rabbis, and they probably do it okay because they just have to watch what other people do at a wedding. And aside from your daughter's wedding, I don't know that I've been to a wedding yet in America where the rabbi who did the wedding is actually licensed to do weddings in the Jewish perspective. Most rabbis that you know in this town, for example, they're all competent rabbis, and that's why they know how to do weddings, but they didn't actually go for training on doing weddings. To put into perspective, it took me 6 months of learning from 7 a.m. till 10:30 at night, every single day, including Shabbat and Sundays, to get a certificate on...
Now, did you know that he was licensed, or did you just notice that he did things in a way that you know...
I didn't check his smicha certificates, right. I didn't. But both from the fact that where he serves as a rabbi in the community that he's a rabbi of, and his competence when doing things, it wasn't something he just learned how to do from the art scroll sitter. It was something that he clearly was very well trained in. And he doesn't need my stamp of approval. I'm just saying, at that wedding was when I first saw a rabbi
I just wondered how you would know
in this
that,
country.
whether you saw it by the way
You
he
see the
did
way
things.
someone does
The way he
something,
handles
you could tell when they're trained or when they're just mimicking. When it's not done as a ritual, but actually it's a legal procedure, and people who know all the details that go into this procedure, you can tell that they've studied this. But when Rabbi Peretz teaches us things, he doesn't only teach us the legal, technical aspects of it. He expects us to become his students in how to live a life as a married person. If you're going to marry off couples, you have to know how to be able to tell them to be married. And if you don't have a healthy understanding of what are relationships and what is marriage, and Rabbi Peretz was the first rabbi that I ever studied from who openly spoke about marriage, even to single people. And not just about the problems, but about the healthy ways to be in a relationship. I knew before I was married that my wife wasn't going to call me rabbi, because I learned this 5 years before I got married when I sat with Rabbi Peretz, that part of being in a relationship is being very close to each other. And I'll never forget when I studied these laws and I came to Baltimore to visit one of my rabbis. I said, "You're a single man, who gave you permission to learn these things?" I said, "I don't know, I'll go ask my rabbi." And I asked Rabbi Peretz said, "I don't understand. So once you get married, you're going to learn how to be married?" He How are you supposed to know how to be married if you didn't learn how to be married beforehand? They said, I'm going to let all my students get married and they don't know anything about how to treat their wife and how to be in a relationship and how to be committed to each other and how to be responsible. How can I do such a thing? They said, no, it's not orthodox, it's not appropriate, it's not traditional. They're good. So then we're doing something different. But the institution of marriage was very important in the Beit Midrash that they come from, and Rabbi Pele speaks about it a lot. And Rabbi Pele, when he sends us out to be rabbis in communities, he tells us, when you get up to speak in front of your community, stop talking about the weekly parsha. Don't tell them about the sacrifices you're going to offer on the Passover Seder. Don't stop talking about nonsense. Those were his words. And start teaching people things they need to know. How to raise their children, how to be married, how to deal with relationships at work, how to build a community, how to teach people things that you're only going to study from a competent spiritual leader inside of their synagogue. Reading the weekly parsha, they could do at home. And it totally shifted our focus in yeshiva. And I want to maybe, with your permission, delve into a whole new world of learning. We started off this class over 5 years ago on the topic of relationships. That was what this class was all about. With your permission, I want to come back to relationships and study about it and learn from it, specifically from the writings of Halav Peretz. If that's okay with you, then I think that's what we could do for the next while. And we'll also have a text that we could stick to and focus around. It doesn't mean we cannot take tangents. It doesn't mean we're not losing our personality, just focusing a little bit more in on something else.
Definitely good.
And I have something else I'll tell you about in a minute. But when I was in Israel in 2010, maybe, Halav Peretz was just finishing one of his. He was helping a couple get through some problems in their marriage. And when you study to be a rabbi, so most rabbis are just about taking a test, writing things down, passing the test, getting good grades, finishing rabbinical school. But Halav Peretz is the whole experience, and I'll tell you that many of his students don't actually ever really spend enough time with him. It's a flaw in the system that he's a part of, that many people want to be rabbis, they want the title, they want to get a job, they want to go out in the world. They don't care to put in the extra effort that it takes to truly connect to the person you're learning from. I didn't care so much to be a rabbi as I cared to be a student of Rabbi Peretz, and where some people might say, oh, so where's your independence, where's your... I'd rather be a student of someone great and maybe one day try to be great myself than fool myself that I'm just going to be my own independent rabbi. That relationship with him is very important for me, and that's why we speak at least once a week. And all the questions that you have that I can't answer, I always reach out and check and make sure that I'm doing the right thing. He's the rabbi that my wife and I call, so no, I'm not my wife's. I'm not my wife's rabbi. Yes.
I remember when you said that you had.
Yes,
she had agreed to do it, and how happy you were.
Baruch Hashem. So after this couple meeting, our parents sometimes comes to debrief us. We don't know who they are. We don't know the story, but he tells us, so we should know practical cases. This man belonged to this Hasidic group, and only grew up his whole life in this Hasidic group. And so you have to judge him as an innocent person, naive, not a malicious person. Because we are coming from our world, but we don't really understand his world. In his world, you do not call your wife by her first name. You do not hug her, you do not kiss her, you don't go for dinner with her, because you don't have dinner with her in your own house. You're not going to go to a restaurant with her. You don't spend time alone with each other. It's almost like you're not married. The definition of marriage is not being together. And it sounds comical, but it's very sad because
they live under the same roof.
Under the same roof.
And they pay the same bills.
Under the same auspices. Right. They might care very much about each other, but the traditional meaning natural way that people show love to each other doesn't exist in that relationship.
They must talk to each other sometimes.
A lot. They might talk, but there's more to
but
relationship than just
not
talking.
over dinner.
Right.
How do they eat? Who eats with the kids? Oh, they eat by themselves too?
Yeah, each of them eat. Yeah. It's not a joke. It's
If you
a
have a
really
lot of
sad
kids,
thing.
it's not
I'm laughing, but it's sad to me. It's not a.
But if you have a lot of kids and a husband who is out a lot, that happens all the
That
time.
would happen, yeah.
But not as an ideal. It happens
as
as
an
Shabbat.
ideal,
They eat in
but-
different rooms.
Oh.
In the kitchen, in the
Like
living room, also.
And the kids would eat with the mother?
It depends on who they are.
Boys and
How
girls
strict
separate?
how strict the family is, that kind
Yeah,
of
it
thing.
could be boys on this side, girls on that side.
It does happen like that a lot. It is bothersome, right?
Different strokes for different folks, I guess.
You know, the Chavetz Chaim was also a great Ashkenazi rabbi in Poland. He received a letter from Rabbi Meir Shapira of Lublin. Rabbi Meir Shapira of Lublin was the founder of the Daf Yomi movement, which you probably know of. Studying a page of Talmud a day, finishing the Talmud every 7.5 years, was a great man. Rabbi Meir Shapira of Lublin came from a similar Hasidic background. And the custom in his home was that husbands and wives don't eat with each other. I mean, I told you, this is not a new world issue. It's not a cult that started 30 years ago. This is a certain diehard, streamlined sect of and it's not standard Hasidism. So no other Hasidic groups operate like this. He sent a letter to Chavetz Chaim saying, would it be okay with you if I came to visit you? I've always wanted to meet you. Can I come spend Shabbat with you in Radin, in Poland? So he said, of course, you're one of the leaders of the generation. You're a great man. I would be honored to host you. So Rameir Shapir of Lublin sent a second letter saying, I just wanted to make sure. The custom in our home is that husbands and wives don't sit together. Would it be okay when I come for Shabbat that we'll sit at the table and our wives will go sit at a different table? And the Chavetz Chaim wrote back saying, with all due respect, you may be one of the greatest rabbis of the generation, but in my home, my wife is more important than you. And if you would like, there's a hotel next to my house. You could stay there. And if you would like to meet at the synagogue, I'd be more than happy to. But in my house, my wife will not leave my table because of your customs. Chavetz Chaim. You didn't buy it then. You didn't tolerate it then. You want to do it? That's your problem. But he felt absolutely not in my home. There's a value. Stood up for something.
Did he come?
Did he come? I don't know. Then we can close this door. They're banging away over there. The air conditioning's on, so it's okay.
That's what I was going to ask.
Could you make the air conditioner a little lower?
Lower, yes.
Thank you.
That door's also open. Before you sit down, Tamar, I think that door's also open.
You have to call me Mrs. Green.
Oh, Mrs. Green. So Peretz was sitting with this couple, and he came to tell us what's going on. Us as me and one other person. He banged his fist on the table and he said, this Rebbe, he mentioned the name, I don't want to mention the name. He said, this Rebbe thinks that he's grabbing onto angels. He thinks that his students are living in the clouds. He said he doesn't realize that he opened up the gates of hell for them and threw them inside with his own two hands. Oh, what did this Hasidic Rebbe do to Rabbi Peretz? What happened? Rabbi Peretz said, listen, has nothing against this Rebbe, but his actions are very dangerous. He said this man came to him for advice. And his question was the following. Listen to the question. You have to put yourself in his shoes, not in your shoes. If I cannot hug my wife and kiss my wife and have dinner with my wife because it's inappropriate, would it be appropriate for me to have another woman that I could hug and kiss and go to dinner with?
I understand that. I understand that.
Meaning, in his head, it's not appropriate to do that with his wife. He has a need, though, and he wanted to know if... You have to understand that he's not talking here... He's not talking about cheating on his wife or ruining his... He thinks in his head, in his crooked world that he comes from, that this might be better, because he doesn't want to, God forbid, ruin the spiritual relationship he has with his wife.
That sounds out to lunch.
That's being nice.
It really does.
That's being nice. It's uncomfortable,
But it's
because
interesting.
conversation is uncomfortable and has
he
to
went
be...
to Rabbi Peretz, but he didn't go to his own rabbi.
Because his own rabbi wouldn't talk to him about such a thing. Rabbi Peretz has a reputation for being one who brings peace into the home. He's a Shalom Bayit counselor, so people come to him a lot. And this
But
is
he
one of the
obviously
questions that came
knew
up.
that it wasn't okay, because he didn't go to his own rabbi.
No, because his own rabbi doesn't talk to him about anything that has to do with his wife. They don't talk about such things. It's
Right.
not discussed.
It's like taboo.
Personal needs are not taken into account.
Now, Rabbi Peretz said that he almost strangled this man, but then realized that he wasn't asking maliciously. At first he thought maybe he's making fun of him, maybe he's recording him. He didn't, all kinds of things happen in rabbis' offices. And then he went, Peretz just went crazy. He couldn't believe such a thing. He said, so beside himself. He said, this Rebbe thinks that he's getting his students, they're going to go straight to heaven because they're so abstinent in their relationships. He said, but look what he said. If this one is asking, he said, how many more are doing all kinds of things without asking? So when I was now in New York, somebody told a joke at a Shabbat table. And the joke was, oh, if you see one of those Hasidim in the street with a woman, you should know it's not his wife.
Not his wife.
That's sad.
Oh
Very
my.
sad.
Well, it was a Hasid who told the joke, not from that
Yeah,
group.
no, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Hasidim are very bothered that this group exists among them, but they do.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It wasn't a joke.
It wasn't a joke, but
No,
probably
it's a
true.
Joke.
It wasn't a
But it's very
joke.
sad.
Very
Because
sad.
this goes against anything that we know about relationships in Judaism. This goes against. So what's the point of bringing this all up? There's a Knesset member in Israel who's from this Hasidic group. And now that it's all in the news, he got up and said, we have freedom of religion in this country. We can do whatever we want. You shouldn't tell us what to do. And then nobody's telling you what to do. We just think you're crazy. Nobody's telling us what to do. We're not telling you. You could do whatever you want. You and your wife want to live in different countries. You could do that also. But as a Jewish people, we have an obligation to when we see something that's not okay, we have to at the very least say, this is not the right way to do it. This is not the way. What about their great rabbi? With all due respect, their great rabbi, he can also be wrong. He could be out of touch. He could just be in a different place. So San Diego, we don't even have these Hasidim here. So what are we talking about this for? I've seen in relationships, and I've only been married for a few years, so I'm not pretending here to come as an expert. I don't come today as Rabbi Yoni, I'm coming as a student of Rabbi Peretz. That's where I'm coming from. The things that I was taught that are valuable in a relationship, that are important in a relationship, I see that many people don't know. Or even if they know, they've been taught differently. In matters of family purity, the questions that I get in San Diego are incredible to me. The fact that people think that all kinds of things are forbidden to them, that is absolutely not true. The fact that people make all kinds of mistaken decisions based on rabbis that didn't know between their right hand and their left hand when they taught them what to do. Rebbitzins who, with all due respect, are not qualified to teach because they can't translate a book in Hebrew on their own. Shouldn't be teaching women or brides how to be married to somebody else. They're not competent leaders of Jewish law. They should not be speaking about Jewish. Just like you wouldn't give medical advice had you not been a doctor. Just because you're married to a rabbi doesn't make you a legal authority. I'm going to be married to a social worker on Thursday. Doesn't make me a social worker. I'm not qualified to do certain things that my wife might be able to. And that's just fair. That's the way the whole world works. If a rabbi didn't study something correctly, or he was taught incorrectly, and so that's what's being taught on the street, someone has to speak about it because it causes problems. There's a certain rabbi that teaches. He comes to San Diego a lot. Not a lot. He's been here a few times. He gives marriage advice. He's not the one you're thinking about, so don't worry. He's been to San Diego a few times already. In the last year, I've had 4 couples almost get divorced because of his advice. 4 from my community, I mean from University City. People that I had to sit with them and say, you cannot listen to this rabbi's speeches anymore. You can't. I forbid it on you. This man is crazy. The advice that he gives are incorrect advice. He claims it's Jewish. He has a source here and a source there. Who did he receive this from? Who was his teacher in these things? And because the nature of the Jewish community is to be very modest, and to be very tzanua, and to be very private about these kind of things, we don't speak about them. But it's a mistake. Because people get the wrong idea. And then people do the wrong things. And then we end up that what I believe the only way to have a healthy relationship is to base it on Torah values has almost turned out the other way. That it's because of Torah values that so many people are handicapped in their relationships. And we have to set the record straight.
What's their interpretation? Their strict interpretation,
But they
which
don't-
seems to turn halacha the other way.
You're right. You're correct. I mean, they're not being taught this. I don't even know if it's malicious. It might not even be. I don't think that Rebbe from that Hasidic group is a malicious person. But it's a perversion of what is classic Jewish tradition. And this is what I want to study together. These ideas, relationships, but from a Jewish perspective. Marriage is not the only kind of relationship that you can. Marriage is just in Jewish law. It's the epitome of a relationship. But the ideas, the philosophy behind a marriage can help people in their personal relationships, with their children, with their co-workers. There's a lot to learn from the discussion that we had about you call your husband by his title. That doesn't only apply inside of a marriage. What about a co-worker? What about a son-in-law? What about your child? Let me ask you this question. I'm in a very awkward position very often in my life. That my parents are also my congregants. I know people think, oh, he's so lucky, his parents are in the synagogue, they support him so much. Do you know how challenging that could be? Do you know the challenges that come along with being the rabbi of your parents?
Never thought about that.
Everyone else in the synagogue, I could say, hey, you're out of line. I do it a lot. With my parents, I can't.
Sure.
I'm held responsible sometimes for things that my parents will say or do that I might not agree with, and I can't call them out on it. And if I do, I have to do it in a very delicate way. But forget that. So I come into a room and people stand up for me. My parents are standing up for me? That's a perversion of everything normal. My father wants to call me rabbi. So he asked me, should I call you rabbi? No. You cannot call me rabbi. So he doesn't call me rabbi. Then my brother comes for the holidays and says, how can you not call your son rabbi? He's a rabbi. I said, no, my dad called me rabbi. And I cringe every time that happens.
Oh.
And so I have to ask a halachic question. Do I let my father call me rabbi, even if it's not correct? To which the rabbi said two things. If that's what makes him feel proud, you let him do it. That's part of you
What
respecting
about
your
feelings,
parents.
though?
What about your feelings?
Mm.
Don't let it get to your head.
You have
he
to
said.
live with it.
Don't let it get to your head.
So you're cringing when he calls you?
He's my dad. What am
know.
I don't call him Dr. Halevy. I call him Abba.
Right,
You know that.
Yeah.
But if that's how he gets knocked, I don't think he'll listen to the video, so it's okay, and you shouldn't tell him anything. But that's the way this.
Right, if he gets nachas out of it,
Then I should let him do it, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Even
It's
if
more
it makes you
important.
crazy, though.
It doesn't. He'll get used
I
to
feel
it.
that there's
He'll get
something
used
wrong
to
with it. It just doesn't feel
It doesn't
correct
feel
to
right.
me.
Yeah.
No. When my father was ordained as a rabbi, he wanted me to also give him smicha, which I can. I've given people smicha before. I don't. I got it from Rabbi Katzin and Rabbi Peretz. Why should I sign on that? It's like the opposite order of the world.
Right.
So I did it. That way I got out of.
But then would you call him rabbi? Because he has this one. Would you call him rabbi?
I call him Rabbi Halevy Jr. Because my father didn't need a certificate to be a rabbi, but he got it
Make a
anyways.
joke out of it, though.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, I'm not upset. I'm not upset about it. I just thought people sometimes look at this and say, oh, it must be so great for him. It's not always what you think it is.
But I have a question actually regarding your father,
Sure.
which I can relate to my father. He has a smicha. He can be as a rabbi, right? He has the title, but he doesn't act as a rabbi. He doesn't work as a rabbi.
Right.
So what should people around him call him?
Very good. It's a very good question.
Rabbi Doctor.
Now, first off, my father still thinks that I'm crazy for being a rabbi. Because in his world, all the politics that goes along with this and the troubles that go along with it, and after all that work, you still don't get paid anything for it. He doesn't understand for the life of him why anybody would sign up for this job description. He's an engineer. He's a doctor. He's a PhD. First and foremost, that's what he is. But as a Torah scholar, he understands it, respects it. It's just that he doesn't practice because it's not something he would ever be inclined to do. And there are many such people that are qualified to be rabbis, that are ordained as rabbis because they know a lot, they learned a lot, but they would never take a job behind a stender, a pulpit, and it's not for everybody. And I understand today, more than 4 years ago, why it's not for everybody.
I know that too.
I mean, how many times I tell my wife, maybe I should go work at Radio Shack. I'll come pray here on Shabbat morning. You know, like, well, sometimes it just reaches a certain point where it's difficult. The halachically correct answer, and I'll talk about your father because it wouldn't be correct to tell about mine, would have been to call him rabbi. Not you, but everybody else. The Shulchan Aruch says that one who degrades a Torah scholar loses their portion in the world to come. I don't understand what this means. Somebody who eats not kosher their whole life, they eat lobsters and pigs and whatever, all day long, that's what they do, has a portion in the world to come. Somebody who drives on Shabbat and forget driving. He burns bonfires on Shabbat outside of the synagogue in front of the whole world, has a portion in the world to come. They'll have to deal with Hashem about why you made a bonfire in the synagogue parking lot on a Saturday morning. That's a different story. Somebody who degrades a Torah scholar loses their portion in the world to come. Understand this.
But
for
listen,
example,
Wait. Says in the end of Shulchan Aruch there's a book. Leket HaKemach it's called. The Gathering of the Flower. In there he says that one of the ways to degrade a Torah scholar, and any other person is by not calling them by the title that they worked for. If someone's a rabbi, call them rabbi. If someone's a doctor, call them doctor. It's the correct thing in life.
But then depending if you know or not. I don't know many people knew my father had a smicha.
Oh, very good. Now it also might be your father's prayer. Your father might say, "Don't call. I don't want to be called rabbi." That might be true.
Yeah, my father would.
I think
not
in my
call
shul.
and say, I'm Rav Louis Klein. I said I'm Louis Klein. I'm Mr. Louis Klein.
I think in my shul, most people call my father Rabbi Shalom nowadays. In this synagogue, not outside of the synagogue, but in this synagogue.
But if you go to a place like New York or Israel,
Everyone's called rabbi.
everyone is a rabbi. Everyone has smicha.
That's another problem.
The 20-year-old and you're like, a Bobby or Zadie, everyone has smicha. You don't.
We once spoke about this. The over smicha, people have too much smicha
It's like
too
having
quickly.
a BA. You don't say Mr. B. I mean, people have
You're right. Okay, you're right.
BAs,
So these things change, and over time they change. But these are, you cannot know the right thing to do. I'm sure that now, when you leave this room today, you'll think a lot more about people and their titles and their professions than you did before today. That's the whole point of today. If you don't discuss certain things, you'll never think about them.
Right.
And I think, and this is a trivial part of a relationship, is what title to call somebody. But it's an important part, nonetheless. This girl who committed suicide clearly felt that her whole life she never received that affection of being called by her first name. She was never called it. And that hurt her. More than anything else. More than not living with her husband or having dinner with him or whatever else it would be.
Because it's a very essential part. Your name is like a.
It's who you are.
Like,
You are.
It's
your
why
core.
we don't call Hashem by... I'm just now learning with someone not Jewish. I said, why does it say Yud, K, Vav, K in your Torah and you pronounce it Adonai? That's not what it says in the book. I said the same reason why your teacher might be called Robert, but you call him Mr. So-and-so. Not everybody is on that place. We can't call Hashem by his first name. So to speak, Yud Kei Vav Kei is Hashem's first name. And our rabbis understood that the proper way to respect Hashem is that even when it says his first name in the Torah, we read it with a nickname, with a title. Adonai, our master. Instead of Hashem's name. Who says Hashem's name? Once a year, on Yom Kippur.
Kohen Gadol.
The high priest, in the name of all the Jewish people, calls Hashem by his Shem HaMeforash, by the name. To still establish, we're still close enough to Hashem to use that name, but only in the right context, and only in the right place, and only in the right audience, and only in the right frame of mind. And when we heard Hashem's name, what do you say? You say it on Yom Kippur. V'am, v'kohanim, noflim al pneihem. We all fall on our faces in the synagogue. We bow down on the floor because we just heard Hashem's name. The Kabbalist tells that at that moment Hashem is filled with a certain happiness, a certain joy, it's a feeling of nachat almost. Rosh Shlomo Carlebach said the only way he can explain that feeling, if you remember when your child said mom or dad for the first time. He said that feeling that you, whoa, he said Abba, he said Dad, he said Mom, wow, that's incredible. That feeling is the way Hashem feels on Yom Kippur. But that doesn't happen every day. That's something to be used with reverence, to be used at the right time, in the right place, in the right... kind of like when your parent calls you by two names. When my mother says Yonatan, it's not the same thing which is Yoni. If it's Yonatan Yaakov, oh, okay, now I'm in trouble over here. This is what did I do wrong? What did I break? I don't know what. In our own lives we have this. You said sometimes to call him by a pet name. Sweetie, or the first name in a stern voice. You could tell there are different ways to use a name, but that's a part of a relationship. Also to learn this kind of the relationship. So I have a proposition.
Uh-oh.
Ready for the proposition?
Sure.
I'm not really giving you a choice, so you can do with this what you want. Before I tell you that proposition.
Uh-oh.
When I got married, so Rav Perez did my wedding. And after my wedding, I felt like, my rabbi's still in New York for 3 more days before he flies back. I just want to go sit with him a little bit. So I went with Dvorah to sit with him for a few minutes. He sat with us for maybe 4 hours. We sat together. And Rav Perez is not a man of many words, so when you sit with him for 10 minutes, it's a big deal. 4 hours, like a whole nother parsha. he told us that he really likes us. And he wants us to be able to know certain things already now at this point in our relationship. He just shared a lot of personal stuff. Very deep things. Not all of which I'm ever willing to repeat somewhere else. But it made sense to me at that moment why I have a rabbi. Not a rabbi like the guy who does the bar mitzvah. That's not what I mean by rabbi. A mentor, a teacher, a spiritual leader. Because he gave us insight into our marriage, into problems that we would inevitably have and we did have and were able to figure out thanks to that discussion. Not just problems, also good things. Things that we would have never been able to access the potential of if it wasn't for that discussion. You heard some funny stories? I'll tell you a funny story. When our Felds got married, him and his wife sat down, like business partners, to figure out what they're good at and what they're bad at. Rabbi Peretz is good at learning Torah. He's good at helping people. He's good at answering phone calls, visiting people, giving advice. He doesn't know when to stop. He doesn't know when to stop. And sometimes it affects his health. It affects his peace of mind. He doesn't sleep enough. One night I was by our parents. I came to pick him up in the morning, and he was falling asleep in the chair. So what happened is he forgot to go to sleep last night. He forgot to go to sleep last night. True story. People just kept coming to him and calling him and asking him. And when you have students that are all around the time zone, they're all around the globe, so we call in all kinds of hours when we need help. And he just didn't have the thought process of hanging up the phone and I need to go to sleep now didn't occur to him. And so they made a decision when they got married, many years ago, that when his wife tells him, Yaakov, stop, he doesn't ask any questions and he stops. Because he knows that he trusts her to know when he needs to stop.
Wise man.
And she told him, not necessarily a flaw of hers, but that she feels that he has a certain integrity, that he doesn't care so much about peer pressure or what other people say, what society wants from them. She asked, this is an interesting thing to hear, but she asked that all the Jewish decisions in their house, legal decisions, philosophical decisions, where to send the kids to, which Jewish school is the right way to send their kids to school, which rabbi they should ask questions to, which synagogue they should pray in, that should be his jurisdiction. Because she has friends and people talk and her family and her parents and what, and so that has been certain decisions like that they made in their life. So our parents told us that one day he was sitting and learning. Well, it happens a lot. He'll call and there's no dial tone. Our parents and his wife disconnects the telephone. 3 days, no one's calling him. She decided he needs to take a break. And it's an incredible thing. He'll literally just get out of his desk and go to bed, and that's what he does. He listens. He told his wife she's very lucky that she has a husband like her, because he listens to his wife. So one
She
day
doesn't abuse it either.
no, because they trust each other. This is a trust. You can't trust somebody if they might abuse this authority, this power that they have. That's a dangerous thing. But here you can two people who really trust each other. So he went to. She said, "You're not feeling well, Yaakov. You have to go to the doctor." So he said, "I'm feeling great. I'm doing okay. I have to give a class." "You are going to the doctor." I said, "But okay, you said go to the doctor." He's going to the doctor. So he went to the doctor's office, Kupat Cholim in Israel. He's standing in line. Comes, says, turns to check in with the secretary. "Sir, why are you here? What's wrong with you?" "Nothing."
That's my wife.
Remember, he always tells the truth.
Uh-huh.
"So what do you mean nothing? So why are you here?" "My wife told me to come here." "Sir, don't play games with me." "No, I'm telling you the truth. Nothing is wrong with me, but my wife wants me to see a doctor." They threw him out of the doctor's office. "You're playing games with us?" So she had to come back and get him in and put him in the doctor's office.
Oh, no.
But that was something they accepted in their life, that certain things they were better at and worse at, and that worked out very well for them. Our parents once sat with me and a couple that I was marrying. And he said, "Which one of you likes to decorate the house?" So the girl said, "I like to decorate the house." He said, do you care about how the house looks?" "No, I don't care. Decoration is not my thing." "It is good. So promise me now that for the rest of time, however she wants to decorate your house, you don't say anything. You just say yes." I said, "What kind of decision is that to make?" He said, "Look at my office." Where's the referee? He said, "See all these pictures, these paintings, He said, "I don't know what they're doing on the wall. I just want a white wall," he said. But his wife thinks that makes his office look nicer. He said, he doesn't care. He said, how many couples fight about they're remodeling the house, they want this tile in their kitchen, I want this color of the cabinets. For what are you ruining your whole relationship for a kitchen? They just make a decision. Before you remodel something, one of us is going to call the shots here. What's the problem? Fight about things that are important. You have an issue in your relationship that you need to work it out. If you fight about everything, then when it's time to actually talk about something serious, you don't believe each other anymore. When you're always complaining, and then something really hurts and you complain, how do you expect your spouse to take it seriously when you're always complaining? It's like the boy who cried wolf. How do you know? How do you know when it's real and when it's not real? When your kid who gets a paper cut bursts out crying, and then God forbid one day they break their hand, you don't know how to tell the difference between the two of them. So in life, it's good sometimes to set up parameters. Some things we had in that conversation that were very interesting. They sound a little old world. Our parents from an old world. But when I approached him about it, he said, the old world wasn't such a bad place. And he shared with me a Dvar Torah, and then I'm going to make my pitch because I have like 2 minutes or 3 minutes on that clock. The Dvar Torah is as follows. When a couple used to get married in Babylon, back in the day, the Talmud says the rabbis would dance in front of the couple. And they would sing, dance in front of the couple, not in front of the groom. No. I said it for a reason. Because I'm sure at that wedding from that group, they don't dance with the couple.
Oh, probably not. Not even
The
that.
rabbis would dance, and they would sing 2 words. Matzah, motzeh. They had a song. Matzah, motzeh. Matzah, motzeh. Which means found, finding. Found, finding. Found, finding. So what kind of silly song is that? A rabbi say they were asking the husband, did you find her, or are you still finding her? And what does it mean? There's 2 verses about a wife in the Tanakh. One verse says, Matzah isha, matzah tov. I found my wife, I found goodness. The other verse says, Motzeh ani ta'isha mar mimavet. I have finding my wife to be more bitter than death. And a rabbi say at the wedding, we're asking him, so is she a good wife or is she more bitter than death? Says Rabbi Peretz, that's a stupid question to ask him. Because he doesn't know her yet. He just got married to her an hour ago. You're asking is it a good wife or is she more bitter than death? So Rabbi Peretz, that's not the point. So the point is, did you find your wife in the past tense? Are you married now? Have you stopped looking? If you stopped looking, and you know this is the best woman that I will ever find in my whole life, you will be happy. Matzah isha, matzah tov. If I found in past tense, I agree this is the only one I'm looking for. You found goodness in your life. Because there always will be someone who's nicer, someone who's prettier, someone with better in-laws, somebody with more money. It's if you keep looking, God forbid, motzeh ani, if I'm still searching for a better wife, well, I'll marry this one for now. But who knows, there'll be a secretary one day, there'll be a doctor. Oh no, he says your life will be more bitter than death. Because you've never stopped searching.
And so many people I've talked to, so many people, I'm not in the business, but who say, even at the wedding, they thought, well, there's always divorce. Or,
Right.
There could
Right.
be somebody else.
And,
At
you know,
their
and,
wedding,
and by
at
the way,
chuppah
divorce is
or
sometimes
even-
the best option that a couple has. That's true. That's the truth. But at the
But
chuppah,
right,
if that's
exactly.
the thought process,
Yeah.
then
That's not
someone should
good.
call off this wedding.
That's not good.
Now, why did I tell you this? Because our parent said, you know how the old world used to work? He said he can't promise you that his grandparents were the most in-love couple he ever met in his life. But they made a decision. They were married, and they were going to stay married. And he says sometimes in our world today, we learn more about relationships nowadays than they knew. We're happier nowadays than they were happier. He said, I'm not sure that you're right. He said, in our world, this security, this stability, I'm staying. This is just what it is. We're going to work it out, and we're going to... He said, the old world is not always so bad. Sometimes there were values in the old world. Today, in today's world, say that in Hollywood, a marriage is successful if it outlasts the milk in your refrigerator. That's a really sad thing. It means our kids are all watching movies, they're listening to music stars who stay married for 3 weeks, and they divorce each other, they marry somebody else, they beat them up, and then they go to court, and they go to prison, they come out, they get drunk, they do drugs. That's who our children are looking up to.
When I lived in England, there was an advertisement in the subway, it was called Underground, but it doesn't matter, saying, your wedding picture, you will pay for your wedding pictures even after your divorce. Advertising the photographer is so good and costs so much money that
you'll
you
still
even
wanna pay for it.
after you
Very
get
funny.
divorced.
So here's my proposition, my proposal. I've been writing a book for a while now. It's translating Rabbi Peretz's essay on Guide to a Successful Marriage and Relationships. And every time I write, I just feel it's not like a halakhic work. It's not like you look up in books, what does the Shulchan Aruch say about relationships? What does the Rambam write about? It's something that has to come from insight, from discussions, from experiences, from feelings, from wisdom that you've gained by being in relationships. And I feel that though this is something I think the world needs to hear, it's something that I can't be the sole authority of. And I'm proposing something that's quite radical, but I want you to bear with me. You've been learning with me now for 5 years. More. Would you be willing to write a book with me? By learning this together, we're filming it, and putting it on paper. I know Marlene said she would transcribe some of these classes. Would you be willing to have a discussion with me about this entire essay for how long it takes us? I don't know, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. And to use the information that we glean together from these classes, the discoveries that I'll make, that you might make, to put together in writing and to put out a book together.
Yeah.
Would you be willing?
That sounds great.
Sure.
That
Yeah,
sounds like
yeah.
a
Amazing.
great idea.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, that's Baruch Hashem. I would be very honored to do such a thing. If you want to actively be involved in taking notes maybe to help me out, or writing down stories that I mentioned, or insights, if someone says something important, then we know we're going to forget about the next class.
But if it's filmed, it's not going to be filmed.
Yeah,
but
but just to make pay attention.
Just to make sure that we pay attention to the details. I would like to write a
That
book
sounds
together with
great.
you. It'll come out from our Monday morning class.
That
It'll be a
sounds
book.
great.
Rav Peritz's work on marriage, but with our commentaries on it. I'm serious. I don't have all the wisdom and experience in the world, and I want to learn it together with you.
I
All
like
right?
it. I like it.
Next week we're starting. B'ezrat Hashem.